Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Fact Sheet. Here, if it's not a fact, we don't discuss them. Every Tuesday evening live on ETV, we sit here to interrogate issues of national interest. And tonight we're talking about a very, very sensitive matter which Ghanaians have been talking about since last year, 2020. And it has to do with COVID-19. We are all excited about the fact that we have received some 600,000 vaccines in the country. His Excellency the President yesterday showed leadership by taking the vaccine. Today, other selected individuals had the opportunity to also take the vaccines. And so there is a bit of excitement in the country. We are expecting some 2.4 million of these vaccines in the country. The President says we expect to vaccinate some 20 million Ghanaians in the country. But for many, this would be the first time that we are experiencing anything called a pandemic. For many, they have no idea Ghana as a nation has experienced a situation like this before, where there has been a pandemic, where there has been the introduction of lockdowns and measures to control the spread of a disease. If I asked, do you know anything about the influenza which hit our country, Ghana? Many would not know about it. But this is not the first time we are having to deal with a pandemic. But in the past, how did we try to bring down the spread of the disease, if there was any? In the past, how did we manage the disease? Learning from the past, what can we do differently to ensure we fight COVID-19 and fight it well? That's our focus of the conversation tonight on Fact Sheet. We are looking at the history of pandemics in our country, Ghana. And there's a lot to learn this evening, if only you'd stay with me live on ETV's Fact Sheet. My name is Samuel Ishen, and I welcome you to the conversation. We are taking a short breather. When we come back, I will introduce you to my guest, and then we'll set the ball rolling. You're welcome back to the conversation live on ETV, and this is Fact Sheet. Again, my name is Samuel Ishen, and I welcome you to tonight's edition of the show. I'm here with Mr. Kweku Dako Ankra. He's a historian, and we're talking about the history of pandemics in the country. Many would not know about what transpired in 1918, between 1918 and 1919 as well. Many might not know about 1889 as well. Many might not know about how ships that were sailing from other African countries into this country were blocked from coming into the country as a result of a pandemic which had hit the world. And so tonight, we'll look at the historical perspective to the issue of pandemic in Ghana, the lessons to be learned from there, and whether as a nation we are even learning anything from what happened in the past. Mr. Dako is here with me, and we start the conversation. Sir, good evening and welcome to the conversation.
Yeah, good evening.
I trust you're doing well.
I'm doing fine.
All right. So from the historical point of view, when we talk about pandemic, how do you understand it?
Okay, so pandemic is normally about certain infectious disease that normally move from one geographical area to the another. So it can move from one community to the another, or from another country to the another, or from continent to continent. Okay. When a disease spread in that order, then it becomes a pandemic, because there is a global or wide spread of that infection or sickness. So that constitutes pandemic.
All right. So would this be the first time Ghana is experiencing a pandemic?
No. As you give it in your gist, pandemic, actually we first experienced our first pandemic in 1891, though globally it started from 1888, 1889 in the Europe and then in the Asia. So they used to refer it as a Persian flu or Persian influenza. Okay. And that was carried to the Gold Coast first by the British soldiers who were then stationed in Bombay. So they brought it to, from India to the Gold Coast in 1891. And the disease, the pandemic raged on from 1891 to 1893 for the scope of 2 years, causing devastation and a lot of sickness. But at that time, because the medical services in the Gold Coast was then not developed so as to take care of, little attention was, given to it. So, though it claimed a lot of life, a realistic and pragmatic approach was not used to resolve that pandemic. So after that, if I may proceed, what happened was that by 1908 also, we had what is called the Bubonic Plague. Okay, the Bubonic Plague is what actually devastated in the main Accra area, the place we call now Accra Central. That was where the entire Gold Coast British colonial apparatus was then residing. So there too, the sickness. So if you see pandemic, all these things were not locally grown. It was the British who brought all these things. So what the Bubonic Plague did was that immediately as it started on day one, it claimed about 127 people's lives in Accra Central. And this became a serious problem for the British to deal with. So for the first time, they went in and brought in Dr. William J. Simpson, who was then from the School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in England, to come and ascertain some of these sickness. Even though at that time there were some Gold Coast, few Gold Coast medical officials who were doing fine, like the first Ghanaian trained medical doctor, Dr. Kote Papafiu. Okay, he was there. We have Dr. Nanka Bruce, Frederick Nanka Bruce was also there. We have the Dr. Acemon, who was also then doing fine. Then in Cape Coast, we have Dr. N.S. Kesley Hayford, Dr. N.S. Mark Hayford, that is the senior brother of J.E. Kesley Hayford, who was also then in. So these people all contributed towards the resolution until W.J. Simpson came in. When Simpson came in and he looked at the situation, he realized that the spread itself also emanates from the way the residential system at the time was, because a lot of people do not even have latrine in their house, okay? And then they squat on the beach. At the same time, there is also no separation of the latrine itself from the houses the people were staying in. So what he did was that in order to quell the spread, what he first did was to first seek for the people who are sick and then try to quarantine them. So for the first time, Gold Coast experienced its first quarantine. When your name comes up that you have been infected, they trace you, contact tracing, wherever you are, and then they grab you and then they quarantine you. Then the houses that the infection also occurred in, because at that time they were mad and some huts, he decided that they should put it on fire. This even created a face off between the indigenes at the beach and then the colonial administration, until a sort of Gold Coast people came in, well-meaning Gold Coast people came in. Then they couched a very good communication to communicate to their people to understand the impact of the Bubonic Plague at the time. And because all these things were going, it also killed a number of prominent Gold Coasters. So even the famous Methodist pastor called Reverend Papo Alute, for instance, Alute Papo, had to even compose a music in 1908 called Bubonic Plague, which was a famous music at the time. So you see certain things have not changed as we do some for COVID now.
All right, so give us a sense, the rate of spread, how quickly compared to what we are experiencing now, how quickly did it spread at the time?
Okay, so at the time, as I said, immediately I said 127 people got infected, and within a space of time, they started dying. So the British took a proactive action. As I said, they seek for the people who have been infected, separated them from among the rest.
This was within what time frame? Was it a week? Was it 2 weeks? Was it a
month?
It
was within, like, it was a gradual thing, because, mind you, at that time, the British were also living close to with the people. So what happened was that they need to separate the people and then take on a futuristic program that will take care of the entire epidemiology of that sickness, so that in the next time that such a thing happened, it will not spread as they were experiencing at the time. So what the British did, as I said, the first one, so as I put some of the strategy, they have to seek people and then they quarantine them. That is, then the quarantine took 2 weeks. Quarantine.
Okay.
2 weeks quarantine at the time. What we had here.
Okay.
So you see, this is not the first time we are being told to be in our house.
Yeah.
So for 2 weeks they were there. Transportation, maritime as well as the transportation services were also curtailed. No one was to come in. again, there was a cooperation between the French and then the British officials so that there will not be movement on the border. So the border itself was also restricted. So there was a border restrictions. Again, they also came in with a policy where people will not be, the infected people will not be allowed to contact the people who are uninfected. So element of social distancing was also introduced at the time. Minimal contact of people was also introduced. Okay. So these were some of the things that they did. Now they also realized that they don't know the kind of strands that were developing. So Dr. W.J. Simpson came in, and then he came with what is called the Accra Simpson Laboratory Center, which also became the Accra Laboratory Center, okay, in 1908. Later in 1918 going, it was turned to Accra Medical Research Center, which in 1924 was converted into Kolebu Teaching Hospital, which we know today. So, you get a point? Yeah. So that was then. Then again, in order to ensure that, because of the houses were also close and the sanitation was a problem, they decided that the people who built houses should not be close to each other. You know, our traditional way of building houses, very communal, so it was close. So now spacing became an issue, that people should not build houses close to each other. Then also separation of the latrine itself also from the building where people are residing, so that it cannot lead straight like that. Then hygiene was also made very pivotal, because they realized that even rodents were spreading the sickness. So what they did was to ensure that sanitation and hygiene become a very important thing for people to observe. Again, you know, our local latrine, both men and women were sharing. So they decided that they should build a latrine for women and then latrine for men. And also the way they dispose the latrine itself, which sometimes they carry it to any time. So the introduction of the pan latrine came about, where the crew people were then carrying that head pan sort of this thing to, you know, dispose of the latrine.
So in all this, you tell us that it was the British soldiers who had brought the disease. It was an imported case of the influenza into the country. Yeah. In all this, what was happening in Britain itself, where the disease had come from, where these soldiers had come from, where these traders had come from?
They themselves also suffered. Mind you, I've moved from the Persian flu to bubonic plague. So I'm dealing with the bubonic fever itself, and how it affected and how it paved way for the future one that we will be discussing on the 1918 one, which occurred. Okay, so what happened with the bubonic plague is that now the British fear of the spread killing them too, because they also started sustaining a lot of deaths. So the idea of building a new place to contain themselves as well as a new hospital then occasioned. So in 1916 they built a Rich Hospital as where it is, and then they started building the bungalow project, which you see in Ridge today, and then cantonment was also expanded to be a residential area for the British officials. So what happened was that all this area, if you are an African and you want to visit Ridge or cantonment, you need to show your pass or you will not be allowed. So there was even an introduction of segregation in Accra, as it happened in apartheid South Africa. Black people couldn't go to where the white people were living. All this as a move to, you know, curtail the spread of the bubonic plague.
So give us a sense of how these quarantines and then these sort of lockdowns, as we describe them today, happened back then. You talk about Greater Accra region being one of the epicenters where the disease really struck. I know the central region, the coastal belt, would have been the areas where the pandemic would have been much severe. In that respect, what was the nature of the lockdowns and then the quarantine system?
So because of the lockdown, you know, in those days, the British have had a policy which goes back to the indirect rule itself, where they use chiefs, especially they started it in northern Nigeria, where Lord Lugard realized that if you look at the northern Hausa political structure, the emirs, were powerful leaders who can stop people from moving from one community to the other. So they brought a lot of taxation, movement taxation, and it was so high that even if you pay before you move, it will be better you save it and do something better with it, which restricted movement of people from the northern Sokoto Hausa Caliphate to come down to southern Nigeria, like the Kalabali and Yoruba areas and the Igbo lands. So that was very good for them. So in most of the British colonial policies, it was embedded with these restrictive measures. So even in Accra, people have to show their movement with certain passes, as I've told you. So it was easy. Of course, they were working with also with a native jurisdiction ordinance, where they work hand in hand with the the local chiefs. So the chiefs know their subjects and where they are. So they are able to know from them. So when it comes to restriction, they have done census since 1889, and they know the number of people within the community. So they are able to check the movement of the people from one place to the other.
Did it in any way help solve the problem at the time when they were trying to figure out what had hit them?
Yes, because it did well. That was why within a shortest possible time, like within 2-3 years, they were able to, ameliorate the spread of the disease.
So let's look at the commerce bit, because obviously traders would then not have the opportunity to come and do their usual trading in Accra and then some of the coastal areas. What happened to commerce at the time?
This one actually hit Accra more than any other place. Though it happened in Cape Coast, it happened in Sekondi, and later spread. This disease will come back in the 1924 again to spread from that time up to 1925, hitting Kumasi even harder. So there are such sanitary and then housing policies that were introduced in Accra was then also to be relaunched in Kumasi to curtail it. So in all, the movement was more restrictive in Accra than any other place because it started at Accra, which you rightly describe as the epicenter of the Bubonic Plague at the time.
Let's look at the similarities, because I know we jump from the 1800s to the 1900s as well to talk about the influenza. What similarities are there? You have given us a sense of what happened, but in terms of the effort at really controlling the disease, the effort at finding a cure for the virus then, how were things done?
So like this is a new disease that all of them are being faced, just like we all faced COVID now. So the British, those times the British have the College of Tropical Medicine in London, King's College there, where they do everything. So for the first time, they realized that there's the need to have a research center within the colonies themselves. So in Accra, as I said, W.J. Sampson, who was the official that the British brought, found that if they would be able to study the infection or the virus very well, it would be better they have a center here and then they study it using the indigenous knowledge system as well as the local medical officials, okay, so that they will help collaborate to come out with a better solution to fight the disease or to get a new medicine that can deal with this infection.
All right.
So that then led to the Accra, or which started as a W.J. Simpson Laboratory Center to study various infections and diseases in the Gold Coast.
All right. Now, I was coming to the point of the role we played as a people in trying to find a cure for, the pandemic then, relating it to current affairs. Now, the local traditional herbal practitioners at the time were the ones that our people resorted to mostly when it comes to, healthcare delivery systems. And so I want to understand, was it the same as today where, we were virtually waiting for the West to find a cure and bring it to us? So at the time, there was the involvement of our local herbal practitioners in trying to find a cure to deal with the situation.
Yes, of course. There were some even priests that were arrested in Accra who claimed they have the cure and that people can come to them and then they will give them the concoctions and other herbs that will cure the bubonic fever. But unfortunately, it was not effective. And this was the main reason why Simpson realized that there is the need for local and that foreign collaboration so that they can have whatever medicine that the locals will also have faith in. Because normally what the British realized is that things coming from overseas, the indigenous at the time, mind you, around 1889 to 1900s coming, there was a serious cultural nationalism in the Gold Coast being spearheaded by Aborigines Right Protection Society, where they have founded a movement within it called Gonfanti movement. And the Gonfanti movement is a movement to return to nativity. So the argument was that our native stuffs are very good. So there is no need to take European names. There is no need to wear European dresses. So even in their conferences around that time, you see J.E. Hayford and John Mensah Saba for the first time wearing their African wear for throughout their conference of over 1 week. That is what they do to, make people learn from it, that it is good to, enjoy what you have and then improve upon it. This will even push Kessie Hayford to write about Gold Coast native institutions, which is a book that he talks about how native ideas can be used and then ingrained with the European ones to couch a better governance system for the Africans instead of borrowing wholesale from the European system. So this was the background from which most of the people were thinking that, okay, the local herbs can be used. And so these chiefs who were in Accra and have been aware of some of these conferences also challenged the use of these European ones and even the approaches in separating them for quarantine, which was a sort of foreign to the African way of life, because we live in a communal way. When somebody is sick, sometimes if we feel it is infectious, then they will let the person go and stay outside the community, but not to live with them. They understand that, but this is their place of residence. And the place of residence for an African has socio-cultural values embedded in it, because it is the land of the ancestor and so on. So when you are moving people, these cultural narratives come into play and then they begin to resist. So for this reason, as we said, the local intellectuals and educated elites of the time came together, and then a lot of even women started writing, catching out campaigns, going to the community to explain things to them. It's just like the way the media also played the role in this time. That was exactly Gold Coast Gazette was writing, Gold Coast Observer was writing, Gold Coast Leader was writing, Gold Coast Chronicle was writing. All of them were writing and explaining issues so that the Gold Coasters will understand.
All right, we will go for a break in a bit, but quickly, under just a few minutes, how long did the bubonic influenza travel? How long did it last?
Oh, it lasted like 3 years gradually, and then it went. Then it resurged again in 1924 when a ship from Nigeria carried it to Takoradi port and it was transferred to Kumasi. Then it started spreading again.
All right, so I am sure there's a lot we are learning this evening about, what transpired in the past, 1889 thereabout. We'll come to 1918 and what transpired, but there's a lot of similarities, in terms of what happened in the past and what we are experiencing now. I'm sure you are enjoying the historical bit of the fight against, viruses and pandemics in the world. We'll be right back. And welcome back. We're talking about pandemics in the world and Ghana for that matter. We are focusing on what has been done in the past when, we were hit by some viruses and, the measures that the authorities then took to address the issues then. We're trying to compare the similarities between what happened in the past and presently, and the solutions we can derive from what was done in the past to deal with the issues of today. As already indicated, we are now having vaccines, and today the over 600,000 vaccines that were gotten, we started with the injection of these vaccines, and so we're trying to cast our minds back. We're trying to educate ourselves. We're trying to go back into time to see what was done in the past. And so if you just joined the conversation, you are welcome. This is Fact Sheet live on ETV Ghana. So we've been through the 1800s until now, But I know in the 1900s, around 1918, 1919 as well, we were hit with another, pandemic. Tell us a bit about that.
So on 28 August 1918, British soldiers who have come to Sierra Leone actually were infected with the Spanish influenza. Now we call it flu. So it occurred in Freetown. So the governor in Freetown wired a communique to the governor in Ghana about the infection that has occurred in Sierra Leone. Unfortunately, before the wire will even reach the governor in Ghana, a ship, an American ship, SS Shonga, had already moved from Freetown and was heading toward Cape Coast. So by 31st of August 1918, SS Shonga landed in Cape Coast. And when it landed in Cape Coast, it started infecting people in Cape Coast. So what happened at that time was that some of them were to be quarantined, but they didn't know what it was. So the ship was allowed to move. But before it would reach Accra, some people in Cape Coast had already been infected and the disease was spreading. People were dying. In fact, somebody was even so confused that he even jumped and entered the sea because he was so frustrated he didn't know what to do about this new sickness that has infected him. So by 31st, the ship also landed in Accra. The crew were already, sick. So they quarantined them immediately. But unfortunately, some have already gone to the dock. So people who were working in the dock system, the transportation and lighterage company, have most of their members getting infected. As about 8 students in Accra Government School also get infected by this sickness. So the disease started spreading in Accra and it became more alarming because the aggression with which the sickness was spreading was something that was beyond the understanding of the people. But then it should be, on the hand side, the understanding was that because of the improvement in the transportation system, because then we were moving from using mules and then horses and that sort of thing. So railway system has been developed. There were some cars too in the system. So it made it easier for people to move from one place to the other. Again, the soldiers too were also in the system because this was the period of the First World War. Okay, so all these things culminated in the spread at the time. So if you go onto the this thing I gave them, so that it show from the Cape Coast to Accra, it will give you step by step. How do you call it? Day-to-day numbers that occurred in Accra. Then you can see it on the board there. On the TV, as the way it went. So from the Cape Coast, as I said, by the 17th, several cases have been reported. Schools were closed by 20th. Social life in the town was disrupted, and many people died, including several prominent people. One infected person drowned himself in the sea. Open air prayers, just like we did, was also organized on the 15th of October, which was well attended because they believed that it was providence and it has something to do with God and their sons. So just like the City FM and City TV led in prayers, Cape Coast people also led in prayers for the country. Then it hit Accra, as I said, on the 3rd September, where the entire crew of the Shonga was infected. So by 15th, doctors reportedly infected. Then by 16th September, 40 infected Africans were treated at Native Hospital. 8 boys from the Wesleyan School were also attacked by the sickness. By 17th September, health workers for the first time in Accra got infected. Then in 18th September again, Government Boys School was converted into a hospital. So you see, just as we were also converting other places into hospital. And the principal medical officer was granted some amount of money to take care of the sick. Accra was declared off limit to the troops. So the white troops who were there was declared off limit. By 22nd September, the spread was so wild. By 27th, 25 deaths were recorded. By 30th September, 53 deaths were recorded. By 1st of October, 59 deaths were recorded again. By 10th, it has started going down. The curve, it has started curving down. So here, the principal medical officer estimated that about 13,000 people were attacked in Accra, with a case mortality rate of 5.30% and overall mortality of 2.62%. If you go to Second D, the flu reached there on 5th September 1918. By the 18th, the disease has established in the town. 8,000 people fell ill, and about 4.5% of the population of Second D died. When I say Second D, it means Second D district, including Takoradi and the rest. Then someone got hit on 21st September 1918. The epidemic was at its highest during the first week. Out of the population of 4,000, about 163 died. Then in Winneba also got it on 24th September. It was the fishermen from Accra who go to fish there, also sent the sicknesses there. And out of the 7,000 population, about 188 died. In Axim, the infection occurred in 25th September 1918. The Secondary sailors who went to Axim also sent the sickness there. From the 8th and 25th of October, normal business in Axim stopped. 25,000 inhabitants were infected and about 140 died. In Qatar, on 25th October 1918, it started spreading and it moved to, and the fear of moving to Lomé forced them to close the border so that it doesn't reach Lomé at all. The French were quick. Then in Koforidia, on 19 September 1918, it also went to Koforidia. A schoolgirl who was returning from school in Accra sent it to Koforidia, and it started affecting them. So Koforidia market was closed. Most of the people were quarantined. There was no roaming on the street, no trading, and funeral procession became only the order of the day in the Koforidia municipality. Osekrom or Kumasi was hit on 23rd September in 1918. By 24th September, the town was put on quarantine. Disease spread and infected more hospital workers in the place, including the governor's, the commissioner's wife. Out of the population of 24,000, about 388 died. Then in Takwa, the mining town, it also went there on 25th September 1918, spread and infected miners. Out of the population of 3,417, 212 people died. Then it moved to Obuase on the 1st October 1918. And then it was someone from Kumasi visiting the town brought it, and it also started spreading. It even went to Wenchi, as well as Sunyani and Kentampo, contemporaneously on 26th October 1918 at the time. Then it moved to Yeji. It's moving to, you see how it's spreading? It moved to Yeji on 8th October 1918. 2 weeks later, it has spread to all other communities. Bole on 26th October, Salaga on 5th November, Wa on 7th November, Tamale on 12th November, Laura on 15th November. But Laura was the place where it was hard hit. A lot of people died in Laura area. In fact, the commissioner report was that for the first time in the northern customary tradition, men started grinding millet and then maize for women because sickness was so much, so it changed even the existing social relations among the people there. But
most importantly,
the disease spread.
This disease, which was ravaging the entire country, what were the symptoms?
The symptoms were it spread like the way this one is, but unlike COVID, where it takes a certain time before you see the incubation period, before it shows that something has occurred. This one was a little bit faster in showing symptoms, so they could see it. So that strand gave them the opportunity to deal with the sickness.
But you talk about movement. If I listen carefully, I thought that there had been restrictions that had been put in place to restrict people from moving from certain areas to certain areas. So how was the young girl, for instance, able to move from Accra to Koforidua to go and spread it there?
So you should understand, if the school is on vacation and he has no word in Accra, she has to go.
Yeah.
She has to go. So this all occurred. Probably she may even get it in a car or whatever. But she was the first person to be recorded as bringing it to Koforidua. Just as somebody also sent it to Takwa and so on. So all this, as long as there is an improvement in transportation system, okay, that it gives opportunity for disease to spread. This is to show you that if you go to Europe, we have had a Black Death in Europe before. We have the Justinian plague in Europe before. In China, in 1333, and the Tongnan Empire, about almost a city of Hebei and Wuhan nearly lost about 75% of their population through all these things. So it shows you that when there is an improvement, even at that time, where horses moves, it could spread. But the modern system of communication is more faster than what used to happen in the pre-medieval time. So it should give you idea why the spread is faster in that period and even now with aeroplanes.
Well, we are trying to have a parallel conversation looking at today and then the past, comparing them. So now we have a vaccine. Around that same period, at what point did they have a cure for the influenza? And how was it administered?
It took time. It took time getting to by 1920s going. It took time because the effort was at trying to prevent the spread. And the colonial administration was very successful at that by ensuring the quarantining as well as social distancing. All those modules that they put up, they enforced that. The colonial administration, they could use that repressive powers of state to have things done. These days, politics and other things,
human rights issues,
yes, play roles in it. This was the time the colonials were doing the way the Lord of War they survey, and as a result they could do whatever they want to do. So this helped a lot. And their vaccination too, unlike maybe what we are going to see, it was colonial vaccination. It was compulsory. You can get whipped for not going to take the vaccination because the government feel obliged to ensure that healthy citizen is the way for the growth of a state.
All right, we'll go for our final break, and then when we come back, we'll take our wrap-up comments and end the conversation tonight on Fact Sheet. We'll be right back. So you're welcome back. This is Fact Sheet live on ETV Ghana, and we've been talking about, pandemics in Ghana, the history, trying to understand how our forefathers conducted themselves when they were hit with a pandemic like ours, the COVID-19 pandemic. So in wrapping up, what would be your final words to our viewers?
So one of the things that sometimes we don't see or observe is also the importance of the pandemic itself and how sometimes it leads to socio-economic development if well managed. So if you look at the bubonic and then the Spanish flu, we were able to develop Kolebu. We were able to get Rage Hospital out of it, and many district hospitals were built to contain this sickness. So it leads to infrastructural development in the country. It's also led to hygiene in terms of hygiene and sanitation, development in hygiene and sanitation, as well as the urban planning for the first time, how we build our houses, the styles, the spacing, and so on. All changed from our primordial way of doing things to ensure that we adhere to health standards. Again, you also look at our lifestyles, the lifestyles and the food eating habit and so on. Also changed all over a time because of the pandemic. So if I tie into what we are having, COVID have made a lot of people to understand the importance of washing hands, which I think it will go a long way before it, in fact, has become part of our life. And I'm sure even if COVID is gone, we will continue to do that thing in our social lives. And also social distancing, the way people visit people anyhow, it is also not going to happen the way it used to be. So pandemic itself, as I stated, where there was a development of new hospitals and other infrastructural addition, which happened in Accra, Kumasi, and in the Gold Coast itself. We are experiencing new ones too in Ghana today. Attempt is being made. You see the fast rate at which the hospital that was of political contestation between NPP and NDC in Legon, how it has been turned and it has been pushed faster to be used for the betterment of the nation. So we will see that sort of thing. We will see improvement in research center and so on. So that's what COVID has given us. Now, the advice to Ghanaians is that we should, be opened and then avoid that pessimistic attitude of bringing certain conspiracy theories on vaccine development and so on, things that people read on the net from these conspiracy how do you call it, websites and what have you, and they use it and push it into the mainstream to argue about maybe the other side of a vaccine. Any new vaccine, whether we like it or not, certain people will develop certain side effects. That in itself does not mean that the vaccine is not it has no efficacy or it's not efficacious. So as it is, my advice is people should go there and then try to get vaccinated, because that is the surest way we can get a healthy population to live on.
We're grateful you made time to give us these historical, perspectives to the fight against COVID-19 in Ghana today. And I do hope and pray that as you watch us tonight, you'd observe the COVID-19 protocols. Indeed, the vaccines are here, but it's important that even if you take the jab, you still put on your nose mask and observe the social distancing. And equally, please wash your hands or use the hand sanitizer. It's important. But I'd like to thank you for being a part of the conversation tonight as we talked about pandemics in Ghana. Some things I didn't know previously that I know tonight. But do make a date, even as tomorrow we'll bring you a repeat telecast of the show at 10 a.m. live on ETV. For now, I'll leave you in the capable hands of Mercy B and the team, even as they bring you a conversation that I know you'll enjoy. My name is Samuel Shen, and this has been Fact Sheet.